Okay. I'm going to talk a little more specifically about the deliverables. I've got a clear conscience because unless you have your work breakdown structure 100% complete, and it's kind of, I had some questions on Primavera, and so that gets back into number one. So what exactly do you have to submit with the scheduled deliverable? Good questions. Then I want to talk a little bit more about scheduling, and I'll say right now I'm going to want to see the work breakdown structures by next Monday. I can figure out how to do a Dropbox by team, but I need one per team. I want to see where you're at. Some people are reporting a lot of progress, and some are reporting virtually none. So each team, by midnight Monday on the 9th, I want to see what you've got. I'm not sure how I'm going to grade it. I may grade it by percent complete. If you're 50% complete, a 50, 70, we'll see. And then I've told people, some teams have asked if they can use Primavera, and I said yes, and I don't have a problem with saying yes. I'm a little concerned that I guess I'll let it go. I'm a little concerned that there will just be one person on a team doing the scheduling, and I guess there's nothing I can do about that at this point. I know there's people that have matriculated up this high and probably don't have schedule skills, and man, if you want to learn scheduling, this is the place to do it. Take this job and schedule it, and answer the questions that I'm going to require of your team, and you're going to know scheduling. But that's up to you. That's between you and your team members. But I definitely am going to want you to, document who does what. So if there's one person on your team that uses Primavera or Synchro, I want to know. I want to know not so much for grading, but for the development of this course, and it's also considered the computer-intensive course, so I've got to be able to show evidence of some of that. There's plenty of computer use besides the schedule to go around. And I'll put these up. I guess I didn't. Here it is. I'll put these up. I'm going to want a little bit of feedback from people. So I'm going to put them up kind of in this form in the next 24, 48 hours. But basically on the estimate, I think in the syllabus it says proposal. All right, so you can't give me a proposal without an estimate, or you should never create a proposal without knowing the cost. And these are the subparts. And this will be the rubric and the weighting. So I'm going to look, does the WBS reflect the scope? Can I understand what the activities are? Do you have it quantified? I'm going to want to see the cost categories, these at a minimum, all right? The labor, the burden, material and tax, equipment, subs. You can have an other category. Hopefully there's not too much stuff in there. I'm going to want to see costs by unit and total. Right? I've already been over this once, but I'll put this up and it'll be almost etched in stone. And that's what I call the cost breakdown structure. The price breakdown structure consists of elements of the direct cost, which will mainly be the CBS, your project overhead or general conditions, your home office overhead, and your profit. Okay. So each work breakdown structure activity can carry these elements. And I should say in here by unit and total also. Okay. I'll correct that, post it to the website. There's just little things like that that prefer to get right. And then I've got a section here kind of called functionality. I want it to be sortable, summarized by master format, division, and uniformat division. Okay. And then there's a written part, estimate basis. There's an RP on that. I just took these sections from the RP. Okay. And it's basically like writing a lab report. So if you know the estimate, it should be basically a formatting issue. And these are explained in the RP. So that's my plan for the estimate. For the schedule, I've got it divided into basically the same thing. I'm going to want some graphic reports, in other words, Gantt chart views, and I want them to have these fields, be able to show these things. So I want at least one that's all the activities, that's got the activity ID, the description, the duration, early start, early finish. Now some of these may be hard to show on a Gantt chart. We can play around with this and move this down to reports. All right, so I don't want you to spend 40 hours on something that's not easy functionality of the application. Definitely need to see the critical path. There needs to be at least 2 milestones, notice to proceed and substantial completion. I want it sorted by early start dates. And you could give me 2 of these. One is all the activities. If you have multiple levels, you can show me a summary level, like I showed screenshots of. This is really no different. I may take the quantity off there, but I might make that extra credit. Almost all these scheduling programs, you can add a custom field, put the quantity in there. I think it's important. The conditions are what work are you going to self-perform? Okay. And I want it resource loaded by craft and equipment piece. So you're going to have to define what are we in this job in our pretend company. What are we pretending that we're performing with our own forces, and what are we subbing out? Okay. And I need to give you a minimum. I think I'll just do it by division. I definitely want you to do the concrete, self-perform the concrete, and I need to go back and look at the structural steel between both projects to make sure they're somewhat equitable, or I may put a percentage in there, okay, that you've got to self-perform like 30% of the work, right? I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but I don't want it resource loaded by crew. So an example of what I'm talking about is if let's say you're using RS means for production rates and resource requirements, you're looking at some kind of Portland cement concrete activity, pouring a slab on grade, for instance. You can look that up in RS means. It'll give you a production rate and a cost that's based upon the resources, the material, and the labor and the equipment. The labor and equipment in RS means are referenced by a crew number. It might say B4. And you look in the back of the RS Means manual, or if you're using an online database, you look up B4, and you can see how many common laborers there are, if there's a carpenter on there, things of that nature. Okay. So when I taught scheduling and project controls, a lot of people would resource load by crew. And I don't like that. It's still valuable. I'm not saying it's not. What would be the problem with cost loading by crew? Why do we cost load a schedule anyway? Resource load. I just gave you the answer, one of the answers. Yeah, you can get incredible management tools if you put in the elbow grease to cost and resource load your schedule. On the self-performed work, if you put in the resources in the scheduling application with their charge rates, in other words, here's a crane, this is how much the crane is per hour or per day. Here's a labor classification on common labor, all right? In our company, we pay common laborers $8.50 an hour, $7.50 an hour, whatever it is. If those resources have a charge rate, including materials, right? If it's a Portland cement concrete item, you've got to typically have Portland cement concrete. Then that will produce cost in your self-performed items, and you can plug or pretend that it's a quotation for the subcontracted items. And you can look those up in RS Means. Right? Everyone follow what I'm saying? Now, when you look up the subcontracted items in RS Means, you need to make sure that it has the RS Means overhead and profit added, because someone is developing their direct cost, marking it up, and giving it to you as a quote. That becomes your direct cost, but they have it marked up. That's why it's cheaper for you to self-perform work, at least on a project basis. Okay? You don't have the overhead of labor burden and things like that. Does that make sense? So if you use the same rates for self-performed work and subcontracted work, you're going to have a delta that's not good. I want you to have some kind of indexing system in there, either a work breakdown structure code, or you can use the uniformat codes or the master format codes if you'd like. Those will suffice for work breakdown structure codes. I think I'm going to take this off. I'll discuss that a little bit later. But besides the schedule, what I'm going to want is a site layout diagram and a cash flow projection. Okay. And typically that'll show an S-curve. Okay. The project controls plan, I took I took this from recommended practice 60R10, and it's basically just a report of how you are going to control the work once it gets started. And there's a list here. You should be looking at this and asking questions. Who's got the authority on the project? This will be covered already. How are you going to plan for your resource use? I'm going to give you tips on that tonight. How are you going to plan for procurement, risk management? Some of these overlap, like the risk management would overlap with the safety plan. Project cost accounting, what does that mean? This is project control, so it has to do with project management and project implementation, right? So the proposal really and the schedule, those things are your planning endeavors, and this is your plan to deliver the job. How are you going to use the schedule to track the work, make progress payments? What are you going to do about change orders? Those kinds of things. That's what that is. What kind of systems are you going to use? I'm going to show you a system tonight. How are you going to communicate things internally and externally? This one we'll probably need to clean up a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and post it just so you have an idea, so that everybody can get involved in your team. You're going to need to use all your team members to get all this done. We've got basically March and April left. Okay. The QA/QC plan basically consists of, what is your quality control policy, who on your team, what are their responsibilities towards it, what are the testing standards and methods. A lot of that you should get from the specs. There'll be some commissioning on this because these are medical facilities. How are you going to do some of the commissioning? How are you going to document your inspections, your tests? What are your processes for making sure that the work is acceptable and that you're meeting specifications? Quality assurance, quality control, QA/QC. And then the safety plan is site-specific. How are you going to communicate safety and health to the people on the project? What's your substance abuse policy, training, personal protective equipment? Do you have a policy on tool and equipment inspection, fire prevention and protection, housekeeping? What's housekeeping? Yeah, basic cleanup, just basic habits, good habits. How are you going to enforce it? What are you going to do when there's violations? Accident investigation, if there is one. Emergency action plans, what would that be? Yeah, I think that would definitely be a part of it. I'm thinking also in terms of, I think both of these projects are in Florida. What are you going to do if a hurricane comes? Auditing processes, fall protection. Do you have a safety awards program? How does it work? Do you have a crane plan? Do you have a plan if you've got to put HVAC units, for instance, up on a roof? Those kinds of things. And then basically identify like the top 5 hazards and risks, and what are your preventive measures for this specific project. So that should give you kind of an idea. So I'll get that up on the website. So I just want to require a submittal for that WBS just to number one, see where people are, and hopefully light a fire for any groups that aren't moving forward. And probably the week after that, I'll ask for a responsibility assignment matrix for all the deliverables. So you need to make sure who in your team is going to help with which of these deliverables. You know, the proposal, the schedule, project control plan, the QA/QC, the safety plan, those things. And you can use it to track your progress. So I think I'll require that, and I'll count those as quizzes instead of, glossary terms like I did for a while. Questions on that before I kind of move into maybe some more schedule stuff and a little bit of resource information. It's all good? You love it? Everybody loves it. I got, when I signed up for, probably as the first time, I told you that on my desktop machine, I have a different version of Syncro than I have on this laptop. And that's because I downloaded it like a year ago, or maybe 6 months ago, or 8 months ago, or something. And so obviously they have a newer version of their software, and they're doing things different. But in order to download that, I had to register and give them my email address. So I get emails from Syncro. I don't know if any of you all do, but I got an email from them today, in fact, and it led me to a part of their website, which I'm going to show you. And this is pretty neat. Don't worry about the 4D part, because we're not doing 4D in this class yet. What it is, this is a report from a company called Beck Construction. If I'm not mistaken, they are in, I think their main office is in Dallas, or the Dallas area. They created a estimating software application for BIM, because they use BIM as part of their processes. And it worked so well, and I guess they hired their own programmers. Now they offer that program, to the whole market. So you can go to Beck and get estimating software for virtual design and construction. And I guess their programmers have done this, but what they have, you don't have to do 4D to take advantage of something like this. This is what they call a scheduling dashboard. And I'll put the link up on the site, but what it does, it basically is a web-based tool that keeps track of the schedules on all their projects. So the managers in their company can look up here and say, okay, well, we've got 10 projects that are underway, and they have some kind of scoring system. Looks like there's only 5 in the pie chart or whatever. And looks like they have, again, this is a screenshot, not the application. There's some options here with check boxes. Looks like they're filters. Yep, they say filters. But anyway, they can look at the project and get some of this information, probably in real time. So as long as their project managers are updating schedules on site, they can get this information instantaneously. And man, it's dynamite stuff to know. They have a little warning, red means danger, Will Robinson, I guess. But you can see it's in calendar days. They've got a bar chart here for the whole job. But they're looking at all their jobs in, one dashboard. That's the whole purpose of a dashboard. Here it drills down into a little more material, a little more detail, excuse me. This tells you when the schedule was last updated, what's the contractual end date for the project, what's the scheduled end date. Sometimes they're different. I mean, I'll go ahead and say this, hoping people, it's a review only for people, but the schedule that you would give to me, that you're going to turn into me, is just a plan. Okay? It's not something that actually happened. This is the way we think we're going to build this project. If this was the real world, and you had a meeting, hopefully you'll have a meeting with your team members and you'll review this schedule, and everyone will agree to the plan. You might have to make some edits. Somebody might have a good idea that cuts some time, or maybe you missed something that you need to add in there. But basically, internally, you have a schedule review session, and everyone says, as best we know right now, this is the way we're going to build this job, and this is the start and end date. And, it depends on your calendar, whether it's calendar days or working days. If it's working days, you've got to put your holidays in there. You've got to kind of estimate some weather days, things of that nature. And that's going to push schedules out. You have to consider overtime. There's different ways to crash schedules. Sometimes overtime, there's a point where overtime is not productive anymore. The time benefit versus the cost. You can run double shifts, triple shifts, all kinds of things to crash a schedule. But the whole point of saying all this is that once everyone agrees internal to your company that this is the plan, then you submit that to the owner or the owner's agent that you're building the project for, and you need to get them to approve it. Probably, I haven't, been on the front lines for 12 years, so things have probably changed. It's probably when they sign it, they probably have a disclaimer on there saying, yeah, we approve this schedule, but it's not intended to mean that we agree with everything you're doing or something. But, they need to approve the schedule. And once they do, then you do what's called, you set a baseline. And all a baseline is, it freezes that Gantt chart. It freezes the durations, the early starts, everything that you'd planned, it freezes it. It archives it, but it's a layer within your schedule. And then when you start the project, you still use the same schedule, but nothing goes ever 100% the way you plan. So some things happen quicker, some things happen slower, catastrophic events can happen, and if you're the project manager or the project controls person or the scheduler, if the job's big enough, you have to update that schedule, hopefully on a daily basis, definitely weekly. You have to represent what's actually happening in the schedule. Okay. So if something's going to take longer, you need to build that into the schedule. So it becomes dynamic. It's not, the baseline stays frozen, but the real plan is going to change week by week, right? And it's dynamic. And that's part of where project controls comes in. You can look at the baseline overlaid with the current schedule, and you can see if you're ahead or behind or things of that nature. So that's part of what they're doing here with this dashboard, and they're looking at some graphs. I would like to see earned value on it, but I'll show you that link. And I haven't looked at this a whole lot, but it's just some more details. It looks like they have a color code here. I'm not sure I understand it completely, but they talk about a baseline. And so I thought it was really slick. They have some way of putting notes on here, or something turns a certain color if there's an issue. Looks like it's identified as a problem with their calendar, the working or non-working days on their calendar. But this is a project controls mechanism. So I'll put this link up there, let you look at it, and you can emulate something like that. You can say, hey, we're going to go get Beck's dashboard, but I want you to be exposed to it, number one, and number two, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So that's what that big URL is right there. Any questions about that? Ever seen something like that? There are some project controls. I don't want to call them software applications. They are, but they're kind of bigger than that. They're kind of, I'd call them enterprise resource systems. They're in the cloud, and the management of the company can decide who can see what parts, but they show dashboards too. One of them is called Prolog. So you might look up, do a Google search on Prolog, and that's a software that would be great to put in your project controls plan. You could probably get some ideas from some of these application websites, even though it's marketing material. It's good stuff. I already talked a little bit about self-performing and crew versus individual. Pretty much talked about all this. Here is a schedule from years ago when I was teaching project controls, and I just wanted to show you that project controls will show whatever text you want over here to the right, just about at any time. You could put the activity description over to the right, or you could put it to the left. But the way it's set up right now are the loaded resources per activity are showing here. So in this activity, whatever it is, it looks like it's some kind of pour concrete activity, which has a WBS code, which means something. I'm clicked on this activity, and I can look at graphs of the resource usage down below. So what this is saying is, you can see by the legend here, it's blue, but what it's telling me is for a type 4 laborer, I only have 3 available, and I'm using them to full capacity on these specific dates. Okay. And if I needed 4, then it would show red up here. I don't know if I have an example of a over-allocated resource. Here I'm under-allocated. I have 3, but only need 1 on those days. And part of the reason I show you this is because if we were doing it by crew, you wouldn't see that, hey, I've got 3 concrete truck drivers, but I only need 1 on this day. And I've got a big gap. I've got gaps all around. So the whole purpose is to keep your resources allocated at 100% all the time. Follow? So I need to find places. I need to take my truck drivers to another project, keep them busy, keep them making money for me. So whether it's people or machines, or even material, I don't want them idle, because I'm paying money, and if they're idle, they're not producing pay requests on projects, which makes me revenue. But unless you have some kind of visual thing like this, how are you going to make those decisions? What if this date thing here, what if these were different months of the year, and the resource that I was looking at was trucks, and I've got a fleet of trucks that make me money, and I saw something like this, I would say, man, I need work for these trucks in these months, I need work for those trucks during these months, and I need work for those trucks after this, because I don't want them sitting in my yard, and I'm paying insurance on them, maybe even notes on them. Got to keep them making money. So if I can see there's gaps in their usage and their employment, then I can find work for them. If I can't find my own projects for them, I'll rent them out to some other contractor. Hey, you need trucks? I got trucks. Yeah. And if you do it by crew, you can't see that individual stuff. Because the crew just says B4. I need B4 on such and such dates. Does that make sense? You're not seeing the individual parts that you may take advantage of. And the other thing is, unless the estimator estimates by crew, then you're kind of deviating from the plan anyway. Okay. And I don't know too many, well, I don't want to get into that discussion. But,
Don't use the crew based on margin.
yeah, take the components of the crew. So if I come in here to, this is project, we'll look at Synchro in a minute. In project, if you go to the resource sheet, well, this is probably not a very good example because it looks like all that they put in was maybe a concrete crew. But you just build this big list. It's a sheet. I call it a resource pool for this project. And you put everything in there. So when you're looking stuff up in means, if you see B4, just put those resources in B4 in your sheet, and it's almost, you can automate it, believe it or not. But put all the all the crews that you're going to use, put those resources in there. Those labor classifications, those pieces of equipment. That's what I want you to do. This is assuming that they have their own concrete pump. A lot of times that's subbed out. All right, let's take it to the next level. In Microsoft Project, in Primavera, I don't know about Synchro. I haven't gotten into the weeds with Synchro yet. I'm hoping some of you do that and teach me some stuff about Synchro. But let's go back to Beck Construction that I was looking at the dashboard. They have 10 projects under contract. Maybe 5 of them are underway. With Microsoft Project, if they have those, each one of those 5 schedules in project, you can combine them all into one file. And I call that a coordinated schedule. AACE calls it a master schedule, but I like to call it a coordinated schedule. So you look at your 5 jobs like it's one job. And then you look at your resource usage across all of your projects and find out what you need to do. Sometimes you're shorter resources and you've got to go find some more. Or maybe, maybe you can reschedule some of the jobs to alleviate any over-allocated resources. I'm not showing a picture of over-allocated resources. I wanted to have an example to show you. But do you see how that would be valuable? And then think about cash flow. Some of these you can either dump the information out into Excel and calculate the cash flow in Excel, or sometimes the application will do it for you. All right? Like Hard Dollar. Remember the cash flow it would do? Well, if you have all 5 projects that are going on in your company coordinated, in other words, all mixed into like one big schedule, you can look at the cash flow for all 5 projects. Whoa, that's really valuable information. So you can allocate your resources, plus look at your cash flow across everything that you have going on, and you can make management decisions that way. If you're cash heavy, you can do some cool stuff. If you're cash short, you can know about it way ahead of time. Okay? And that's why it's important that the project manager upgrades the schedule on a periodic basis, hopefully, daily, bi-daily, at least weekly, so that you can see those updated schedules, especially if you're coordinated and using them for these decisions. Now, I'm not asking you to do this, but if you understand what I'm saying, you can throw it into your project controls plan. But what we taught when I was consulting, and good contractors have done this. See, these resources are generic. That's just a PC concrete pump. That's just a concrete truck. These are just generic truck driver classifications. If you replace these generic resources with specific resources, in other words, if Jeff Hannon is a truck driver, put me in here. Okay? If Ross Bennett is a truck driver, put him in there. Well, it looks like you only need one, so you only need to put Jeff Hannon in here. And the concrete trucks are truck number 1, truck number 50, truck number 67. So if you do this resource allocation with specific resources, now you're really getting into some crunching that you can do as a manager. For instance, you could pre-print timesheets with who needs to be on what job, on what activity. That's the kind of stuff that hopefully gets your mind thinking. Right? When you go to that level of detail, that's when you can grow a construction company. But if you're not doing these things and you try to grow, then you can shoot yourself in the foot. And it takes about 3 to 5 years to shoot yourself in the foot. There's old sayings that it takes 2 to 4 years for a contractor to go out of business because of cash flow. But finally one day, if you're not doing things right, finally one day you miss a payment. And it's probably to a vendor, like a concrete supplier. And maybe they age your accounts payable 30, 60, 90 days. You go past 90, then they start calling you and rumors start going around to your other vendors. And it's like a run on a bank. They start calling you because the rumor's out that maybe you're having a little bit of trouble. And the minute that you miss payroll, it's done. It's gone. It's not a rumor anymore, and your people will leave you. And I've seen it. Not with a company I work for, but I've seen it. Well, one thing that did happen to me, one company that I worked for, the owner was, the succession plan was that his son, he was grooming his son to take over the business. And his son committed suicide. And his other offspring was his daughter. And they were like oil and water. And it wasn't that she didn't have the right competencies or anything like that. It was just they couldn't get along. And when two principals of the company go 2 weeks without speaking, bad things start happening. And finally, one of them just gave up and said, "We're done. Let's just close it down." And the bonding company had to come in and finish the projects and all that kind of thing. So it's a pretty scary place to be, but in hindsight, I learned how bonding companies do business. All right, so resource loading. Now it looks like, just for kicks, it looks like this has a baseline set, and it's probably hard to see on the screen, but there's a little black line running through there, which means percent complete. So maybe we could look at I want to look at a resource Gantt. forget what they call it, tracking Gantt. Get rid of details, see if this shows anything. It doesn't really show anything. What you're looking at is, I think the gray bars are the frozen baseline. And this doesn't make any sense because these activities are 0% complete and the successors are 100% complete. Oh, here's one. See here? It's showing the delta between what the baseline was, this gray bar, and what actually happened. So that's a baseline. Remember, that's just a frozen screenshot of what the plan was originally. You'd have multiple baselines. I mean, I've worked on projects that lasted 2 and 3 years. For legal purposes, we would save a baseline. I can't remember if it was every week or every 2 weeks. So 52 weeks in a year times 2, say, got 100 weeks, it's a lot of baselines. But sometimes it helps you, especially if you're in a claims situation, a legal situation. The other thing I noticed on this, I just found an old Microsoft project submittal from, again, years and years ago, but this is showing a constraint. What are constraints? Let's see what this says. This says start no earlier than a specific date. I'm not saying that constraints aren't sometimes required, but you don't want very many of them because it messes up the forward and backward pass and it screws up your logic and your calculation of, it doesn't screw up your logic, it screws up your critical path calculation, which can mess with your float calculations on your activities. So constraints are sometimes necessary, but boy, use them sparingly. Can anyone think of why you would need a constraint? Yeah, I think a lot of it you could probably do with a milestone also. Maybe you could put a constraint on a milestone. I'm not coming up with a lot of good examples. When I was building highways, in the summertime, we got the road all torn up, and here comes July 4th weekend. Most traveled weekend of the year, probably. There would have to be certain lanes open, by July 2nd. That would be a constraint. No matter what my schedule did, that was not optional. That could not float with the schedule logic. It was contractual. This lane must be open, or these lanes, northbound and southbound must be open, at least temporarily or a detour by July 2nd of the year. That's a constraint. And it should mess your forward and backward pass up because it's contractual. Does that make sense? But if it's not, don't use them. I think a lot of students do this either not knowing they did it or they didn't like the way their logic placed the activities in the Gantt chart, and they use constraints to just make it work. Kind of like little bars in Excel moving around. This is the way I want it to look. I'm not sure that's what happened, but that's an awful lot of constraints. So it's probably human error regarding the software. Not much time left. If I was in this class as a student, I would build a schedule. This is just me. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm being honest. I know Project so well because I've used it to teach classes with, and I've told you it's not the best tool. For teaching, I think it's fine. I could build a schedule so fast in Project that I would probably do that and then suck it into Synchro, which this is what I did. The project file, you have to, you can export it or do a save as. You have to come in here and choose the XML format. And if you save this project schedule or this project file as XML, then you can import it into Synchro. You just go right up there and find the file, and it comes right in. And the only reason I would do that is because my learning curve is probably going to be steeper in Synchro because it works a lot different. But if you're not familiar with Project, you know, like if I want to know what are it brought all the resources in as human resources. I noticed that. That's not a big game killer to me. I mean, if it was something I was submitting and using as a management tool, you know, I'd make sure that a crane wasn't a human resource. But it's almost like if you click on an activity and let's see, select the resources, it selects them over here, I think. And it just works different than what I'm used to. Okay. I think you can come in here and, you know, add equipment, people, material. I hope there'd be a register view. I just haven't found it. So again, if you're just learning a scheduling software program, this will probably be fine because you're not held up with prior Pavlov behavior like I am with Project. That make sense? Yeah, real smooth. And you know, look, this I haven't touched it since I imported it. I mean, I don't need that frame. You know, and it may be, you know, if I was, how do I move this timeline? Here we go. See, there's no scroll, there's no bar to pull. Just little things like that. They're not anything big. It's just, you know, what I'm used to. But I'm holding the control key down and I can expand and contract the date ribbon and things of that nature. I think the other day we went in here and, you know, you can customize the columns. I would definitely put predecessors and successors in there. And the other thing, you may want to look at my deliverable breakdown and say, you know, which is the best one to get reports out of. That's something I'd definitely explore. But, you know, I'm going to want to be able to check your float. I want to be able to know what your critical path is. I want to be able to see that every activity has at least one predecessor and successor, except for the first and the last milestone and summary activities, stuff like that. So I'm asking you for reports so that I can check that. I may have you send me the file, the native file. So Synchro has a file type. Microsoft Project has a file type, MPP. P6 I think does too, but I don't have P6. And I don't plan on installing it anytime soon. So I need to be able to see from some reports what I can't check with P6. Do we have it on the, we may have it on the, we may have it on the labs here. But I don't know version control, and, you know, I haven't been around Primavera in quite some time. When I was using it, it was P3. And this has a resource leveling thing in it. It says, I haven't used it, I'll just say yes. But now, I don't know how to find my, you know, where are my, those graphs we were looking at are called histograms. Where are my resource graphs? Now that I've leveled the resources, where's that information? So it's just I haven't learned how to do it or gone to the online help, I suppose. Let's see what this says. So maybe I have to print a report. Maybe it's over here where I can see a graph. I just, you know, I haven't figured it out yet. So hopefully some of you will show me all that. There's the resource cost rates and totals. I just haven't explored enough. There's earned value information. That's dynamite. And that, if you understand what earned value is, that's going to make me do somersaults in my chair if I see that in your project controls report and think you know what you're talking about. But anyway, that's about what I wanted to cover. I'll get this stuff up there. I may want to tweak one of them a little bit more, but definitely the estimate and the schedule. I want to put it all up there because you need to assign your team members internal tasks so that you can all get this done in 2 months. Folks that have a work breakdown structure already are ahead of the game. And the reason I'm saying estimate March 30 is because the work breakdown structure that's quantified is still a long way away from a proposal. So, man, time to crash the schedule, I think. So it just depends on where you're at now, whether you have to crash or not. I'll take most of these deliverables in, you know, April, late April. But I'm going to ask for some submittals, count them as quizzes to see where you're at. So, all right. Well, thank you very much.